the Valley, and today we're going to show you my method for doing raw edge applique art quilts. So we are using Tony Whitney patterns. You can see some of them behind me, the red fox, the rooster. The rooster's in my coloration, not hers. The cherry blossom, the one whose name escapes me, but it's a horse. And then of course the otters. The otters are adorable. Tony Whitney, McKenna Ryan, Nancy Halverson, and I just ran out of names, but there's a bunch of folks that design raw edge applique patterns, and they use a similar technique, all of them. Or if you're going to do your own pattern from a photograph, you can certainly do that using this technique. It's very easy. This technique is very easy. Now, the directions in the Tony Whitney kits and the McKenna Ryan kits are going to be very different from what I'm showing you right here. This is, however, very much easier than those directions. So let's start with supplies. What do you need to start with? You are going to need Steam-A-Seam. So you can see I've already cut some out of this. This is Steam-A-Seam Light 2. That's very important. Steam-A-Seam Light 2. You'll notice that it is yellow gridded on this side. The blue gridded Steam-A-Seam is old and will not work properly. You need to discard that. If you have any with blue, you want the yellow. The yellow, additionally, is the side that you either print or trace on. Now, why am I recommending you buy them in the sheets like this? Very simple. If you get it by the yard, it's rolled up. And if you're trying to trace on that, you're fighting that roll. It's going to keep curling on you. You don't want to have to fight that roll. So if you get the package, you can just trace right on there. The other thing with the package of the 5 sheets, which is way cool, is that you can just put it through your printer and you don't have to trace anything. So that makes life a lot easier. I have 2 of the Tony Whitney kits prepared today. One of them I traced, and it took me about an hour and a half to do the tracing, and one of them I put through the copy machine, and it took approximately 5 minutes. So only can do that with the sheets. And again, you only do the tracing or the copying on the yellow side. For most printers, that means you would load the paper yellow side down, and then it'll print on the yellow side. That's important because the paper comes off easier on this yellow side than it does on the other side. Okay, the other thing that you are going to need is, if you're going to trace it, a nice mechanical pencil. This is a nice mechanical pencil. Number 2 lead. You just push in there. Actually, it's 0.5 millimeter, but refillable. You don't have to sharpen and stop, and you don't get lead shavings all over the place. Your hands will get pretty dirty if you are tracing, and it's just the nature of the beast. You just stop and wash your hands every so often. The other thing you're going to want is a pair of these Fiskars micro tip scissors, and mine are filthy because I've been cutting all kinds of pencil lead with them. You can see the handles, there's pencil lead on the handles. But the reason you want these is because they are micro serrated along the blade, so it grips your fabric as you're cutting. Additionally, you've got this nice spring in here, so when you're cutting out, say, all of these itsy bitsy little fur pieces on here, your hands don't get as tired because the spring does half the work for you. So these are fabulous scissors. You want to get yourself a pair of these. You'll keep them by your machine anyway because they're good for clipping threads. You want those. You want to get yourself a good pair of tweezers. And when I say a good pair, I mean like these. Not the curved edge serger tweezers, but like these. So these are just needle sharp on the end, and that makes it very easy to grab some of the smaller pieces, slide pieces underneath one another, grab the edge and pull one out. It just makes life much easier. So you want to get yourself a good pair of tweezers. And the thing that makes all of this possible is the Fusamat or the Fusion View. So Fusion View is made by E.E. Schenk & Company. It's the one that's currently on the market right now. The Fusamats are a little heavier duty. There's a limited supply of Fusamats left in the whole wide world because I won't tell you what happened, but there was jail involved. But anyway, I think she's still in jail. Anyway, we do have a limited supply of Fusamats left. I have 2 different Fusamats in 2 different sizes. I've got the 30 by 18, which is the one I used for this carousel horse I'm going to show you. And then I've also got the 20 by 20 The 12 by 18 is also a nice size, but this Fusamat makes all of this possible, and you're going to see that when we get into the technique. The other thing that I'm using is a light box, and I have a daylight light box. This is the one that I'm using. This is dimmable, so I can change the intensity of the lighting just by touching on it like this, holding down on that button. And I've been using this one. You can lightly tack iron directly on this with your Fusamat on top of it. Your Fusamat is protected up to 450 degrees, and it will not harm your light box. You can't iron on it, but you can tap, press, and lightly fuse right directly on your daylight light box. So the light box is not, it's not required to do this technique, but by golly, it makes it a lot easier. So let's talk about the kits. So we sell the McKenna Ryan and the Tony Whitney kits. The McKenna Ryan ones, we just order the fabric and then we cut them ourselves. The Tony Whitney ones, I order them directly from Tony and Frank Whitney out in Montana, and they cut them and they send them to us. Why is that important? Well, because they're not laser cutting their pieces. If you buy a Tony Whitney kit from somewhere else and they've laser cut the pieces for you, they have used heat and bond. Heat and bond is going to make this really, really difficult to do. Heat and bond does not stay where you put it. Steam-a-seam, when you peel the paper off the back, is tacky. When you put it down, it's going to stay where you put it. You can reposition it. It doesn't get permanent until you've actually fused it with your iron. Heat and bond will just blow all over the place. The reason I know that is because I taught a class for a McKenna Ryan block of the month, and this one poor gal had laid out her entire block. She picked up her pressing station to walk over to the iron and walked in front of a fan, and everything just went, she had to start all over again. It was terrible. So that's the reason we don't use the laser cut kits with the heat and bond in them, is because it is not for multi-layered fusible applique. It doesn't work well. Steam-a-seam works perfectly, which is why you'll find it in the directions from a Tony Whitney kit or from a McKenna Ryan kit, and it will say in them and on both their websites that they don't produce, or Tony Whitney does not produce pre-cut laser cut kits for that very reason. All right, let's talk about what's in this kit. If you get a Tony Whitney kit, obviously you get the color picture of what you're making. You get your directions, which we are going to completely ignore because we're not going to follow these directions at all. You get all of your different pattern pieces that you need to trace or copy. You get a full-size layout sheet that shows you where all the pieces go when you go to put your work together. And you get the fabric very artistically folded up in the size pieces that you need. And if you look on here, you will see that they're all numbered. So you know exactly which fabric goes to which pieces. This makes life much, much easier. So if you were to buy the fabric yourself to make one of these kits, and you could certainly do that, you would spend a great deal more on your fabric than you would by just buying the kit, because when you buy the kit, all you get is the size piece that you need to make the quilt. Like I said, we order directly from Frank and Tony. They make these beautiful kits, and they're the fabric she uses in the sizes that you need. Makes it nice. All right, let's talk about the tracing part. I don't think you guys need to watch me trace. You can trace, but let me explain how this works. You'll see this says B8, and then there's a number 13 underneath that particular piece. That means that's piece 8 for the body. So body, piece number 8, color number 13. On Tony Whitney and McKenna Ryan patterns, they have grouped the pieces that go to the same color together. So this is T30, turtle 30, number 13, T23 13, T1 13, T20 13. Then you get down into here with B11. be one 11. So here's your color 11s are down here. So all your 13s are going to be up in here, and all your 11s are going to be over in here, and that makes it a little easier for you to trace or copy and then fuse onto the right fabrics without wasting a lot of steam-a-seam. Okay, so let's say you've chosen how you're going to do this. You're either going to fuse, or you're going to trace, or you're going to print. Either way. So you've got your pieces all done. On some of them, there are more pieces than others. So the ones that we've chosen here are a couple of the easiest ones to start with. So the sea turtles doesn't have quite as many pieces. You'll also notice that this right here, this flipper right here, is free. So it actually comes off of the art quilt, so that's kind of fun. The red fox has fewer pieces, and it's actually one of the easier ones. I did this really quickly. The poppies, because they're flowers, you don't have to be quite as critical about how your pieces go, because you know it's not about the eyes. So flowers are all different. This is a good one to start with, as is the sunflowers. Flowers are all different, so if your flower doesn't look exactly like that, that's no big deal. So those are good ones to start with. Let's say that you decided you were going to trace yours. Here's where your light box comes into play. You're going to take your papers that you're tracing, put it right on your light box, put your steam-a-seam right on top, and you can see how clear that is for tracing. Just easy peasy. So that's one of the reasons you're going to love to have a light box. I'll show you another reason a little while later. So, like I said, you guys don't need to watch me trace. Let's pretend like we just traced out all of these pieces. So here we go. We've traced all our pieces. Turn that off so you can see. There's my traced piece. This needs to be fused onto this. If you are using non-batik fabric to make your art quilt, whatever kind of art quilt you're making, if you are not using a batik fabric, you're going to want to take the sizing off to use steam-a-seam 2. So to make sure that everything sticks the way it's supposed to, if you're using a print fabric, you're going to go to your steam iron, and you're going to steam the heck out of it to get that sizing off of your fabric. That way your steam-a-seam will stick the way it's supposed to. If you're using a batik, you don't need to worry about that sizing. Your batik has been washed and washed and washed multiple times based on all the stuff that's on it. So now I'm going to show you fusing. Maybe, there we go. Had a heck of a time getting that started. So this is piece W82, wing, piece number 82, and it's in color number 5. This is my color number 5. So I'm just going to press that on there. And I'm going to take my iron. And I'm just going to set it on there for several seconds per location, just to make sure it's on. You can see when it's on because the paper will actually get transparent. So as soon as it's down there, well, the paper kind of gets transparent. All right. And that's all there is into the fusing. So all you do is get your pieces all traced or copied. Then you're going to cut them apart by the color. Then you will take and place them on the correct color, which if you have a Tony Whitney kit, you know what that is because each of the colors are numbered. And then you're going to cut them out. So this is where these cool scissors come into play. So I'm just going to rough cut this out so I have that out. Okay, these scissors, you're going to aim your fabric into your scissors. Take long, straight cuts. Aim your fabric, not your scissors. So see how I got that nice smooth curve there? And then this other side is going to be a little more difficult because it has feathers. So again, I'm taking my fabric and I'm coming around my scissors. I'm not aiming my scissors, I'm just cutting down with my scissors while I aim my fabric. And that's going to get you nice rounded parts on the parts you want rounded. On these scissors, they're sharp all the way down to the very points. So you can make the fur like on this, you can just go snip, 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 snip with the end of the scissors, and that'll make those fur points. But this is feathers, we don't want points, we want rounded edges. So again, I'm aiming my fabric into my scissors. And there you go. So you're going to cut all of your pieces out for your entire kit. Get all your pieces out. Here is where you want to have a nice supply of plastic bags. Because the very next thing you're going to do, and trust me, this saves you a ton of time if you do this, you're going to divide all your pieces out by where they go. So these are W pieces, that means they're wing pieces. All my wing pieces are going to go in one baggie. This piece right here is an H, which I'm assuming stands for the head, or maybe it stands for heron, I'm not sure. I don't have it up in front of me. But anyway, I would take all my H pieces, cut them out. The H pieces go in one bag. The W pieces go in another bag. And what else we got? We got a whole bunch of other pieces down here. There's leg pieces, there's body pieces. All those individual pieces, you're going to cut them out and then you're going to bag them up together. All right? Now let's move on to how do you put it together. You got them all cut out, you got them all labeled, you got them bagged up, they're all in the right places. How are we going to make the design? This is the easy part, believe it or not. You've already gone through all of the hard work to do the other parts. Now you get to have fun. This is the paint by number part, and this is where your Fusamat comes into play. So to do this part, you're going to take your layout sheet, which I have right here, for my carousel horse. Now I have already gone through and I have made all of the individual components of this already, other than this one piece. So I'm going to demonstrate how you lay out the one pieces using the Fusamat. So here's my baggie. Here are all of my pieces that go on the bridle. Make sure I get them all out of there. Oop, that didn't go with that. Okay. All right. The next thing I'm going to do before I even start, it will just save me a ton of time if I put them in numerical order. So here I am, putting everything out in numerical order. Except I can't read what number that is, so I guess I'll put it there because I don't know what number that is. 15 goes there. 10 goes there. And this one has some small pieces in it. I'm sure you're noticing this particular one has some pretty small pieces in it. And a lot of them. I was cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting last night. 1, 14, 9, and B5. Okay. So now I have my pieces are in numerical order. I know where everything is. And I'm making this section right here. So I've already identified which section I'm making. All I have to do is find where I start. B1, I can see clearly through my Fusamat because my light box is underneath there. I can see B1 is right there. So I'm going to take B1 and I'm going to take the back off, the paper off the back. And I'm just going to place that right on there. And then B2, whoops. I've got my light box backwards, so my power switch is where my hand rests. Okay, B2. This is like paint by number, only with fabric. It's really kind of fun. You can see how quickly it goes once you get yourself organized. There's B3. Which in this instance stands for the bridle. B4. B4 and after. Let's see, that goes this way. This one is 5. I don't have a ton of pieces on this particular thing that I'm showing you. The last one I did had a lot of pieces. I'll show you that in just a minute. You'll see how pretty the saddle is. This is her newest design, the carousel horse. Just came out and it's gorgeous. But oh my goodness, it had a lot of pieces. Okay, I'm already up to B7. It goes pretty quick once you get the hang of it, especially if you can see where all these pieces go. Now, her directions and McKenna Ryan's directions and a lot of others' directions have you actually taking a vinyl overlay, drawing your design out on the piece of vinyl, taping the piece of vinyl to the top of the layout sheet, and then using tweezers to slide things in between the two pieces. No. That was way too much work. And even more tracing, because it's pretty hard to send a piece of vinyl through the printer. So we just said no. Uh-oh. Did I just put down? I had 2 10s. I don't know how I managed it, but I have 2 10s. Oh no, that was a 7. I put the wrong piece down. Don't do that. B7 goes over here. There we go. Okay. Some of these pieces are small enough that they can't quite get the numbers on them, so you have to go back in with your mechanical pencil and kind of scribble those numbers in, and sometimes it's hard to tell what they say after the fact. Okay. And there we had, let's see, what was this? 15 pieces. I just put 15 pieces down, or I'm almost to the 15th piece, if I can get that backing off of there. It's a circle, it's harder on a circle. Okay, so I just put those 15 pieces down in a matter of minutes. That's what makes this way of doing it so much easier. It is such a time reduction. adjust this a little bit. I didn't like the way that laid, and I know I'm going to fuse it right on here, and I wanted to make sure, oh, I see, there. I want to make sure all my pieces stick together. Okay, that's all there is to it. So that's laid out there. And now I'm going to take this iron, which is plugged in over there, so I got to move my thing so I can get it. And I'm going to tack fuse this right there. And that just made that whole process much, much easier. Now with a Fusamat, I can take that directly off. There's nothing on my Fusamat. And if you see the back of that, you'll see how it's all shiny. All of the fusible is still on the back. So it's gonna stick where I want it when I go to do my final layout, which is now. That was the last piece that I needed to use, or to put together, before I could put together my entire piece. So I am going to show you now how you take all those individual components that you've made. Thank you. I'm going to take all those individual components that I've made. So I made this part, I made the saddle, I made the tail, I made the back leg, I made the mane, what else? I think that's it. And I just made the bridle. So now I can take my backing fabric, my background fabric, I beg your pardon. And I can lay that like here. And I'm going to put my horse together. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure these pieces aren't fused to anything. So those are just separate because they weren't, I mean, they just ran through the background. So I'm going to put those on. I'm going to make sure I get those in about the right place. And then the rest of my horse, carousel horse, can build right around that. So this is P2. And it starts right here, so all I have to do is lay that right there, get it straight. If I try real hard, I can just barely see some of the outline through my batik fabric. And I'm going to put the bottom right where it's supposed to go, which is right here. And now I should be able to take everything else that I've already made and it should just lay together. And the reason it's going to lay together and be where it's supposed to be is because I have used the lines on the layout sheet and my Fusamat to make everything to exactly the size that the layout sheet shows that it should be. So here's the front of my horse. And I can see that the leg is right there. I mean, I can just pick that up right there and see, but it's right there. Make sure that I'm kind of in the right place. Right there. And you'll see that I'm covering the bottom here. So that's lining up. I'm going to make sure that I'm not angled at the wrong angle, and it looks like I'm a little off because he should be about right there. Okay, and I'm just going to, it's steam a seam. So this is not permanent. I can move this as many times as I need to get it right. Here's his hind leg. I'm going to find out where his hind leg goes. It looks like about right there. And this should touch right there. So I'm about right there. Am I missing a leg? I think I've got a leg that's gone rogue. This is my saddle. And we want to make sure that everything goes where it's supposed to. So if I look on my picture, I see that this should be right there. everything's lining up about like it should be. I've got this V right here. This should be lined up right about like that. So there, I've got that. This is going to go over the bridle, so I want to put this in place. This goes right here, just like a normal bridle would, so I'm going to line that up with my horse's head. This is my other ear, and part of this lays underneath the head, and you would know that. So that goes right there. And this other part comes right down over my bridle. Then I've got my mane, which fits right in here. And we're going to want that rose to come on top of the mane, so I'll just peel that up, put that over the mane. And then I've got my tail. He's coming in right over here. And he goes right underneath the leg there. And you can see how everything just fits. And again, that's because I made it using the lines right on this layout sheet. So all of the gaps and things that might have been possible to be present in here are not, because I made it using the layout sheet and everything lined up with the lines on the layout sheet to begin with. Pretty easy. I've misplaced his leg, so I have a three-legged horse. I'll have to find his leg. I don't know where it went, but I'll find it. And then we'll get him finished off. I will just do a final press on this, and then it'll be permanent. But for now, we're gonna assume that this is right, and we're gonna move forward into our next step in this process. Alrighty, so now we have got our piece is all fused. We've trimmed it down to the size that's indicated in the pattern. We've added our borders onto it per the pattern, so that's pretty simple. You didn't need to watch me do that. And now we're gonna do the top stitching. So I do not have this spray basted. I just pressed it together. The reason I didn't have it spray basted is because we already have a whole bunch of sticky stuff on here with the steam-a-seam, and you don't want to add more. One of the things that I'm using that you want to look into is a Schmetz micro, no it's not, a Schmetz super non-stick needle. I'm using a 90-14. You could get a smaller size. It comes in an 80-12, but I'm using a 90-14 because we're going through so many different layers of fabric. I didn't want to get a lot of thread stress going. So you're going to want to start doing this in the center and move from side to side if you can, and that keeps everything nice and straight and flat. And I actually am using my Bernina with my stitch regulator, and I am free motion top stitching this. And this serves as my quilting as well as holding my pieces down. And you see how easy that went. That's all there is to it. And I'll just repeat that. For all the individual pieces that I want to hold down. Now the pieces that are on the bottom, I don't have to do those. Just the pieces that lay on top. And some of these real skinny ones, I'm going to do one set of stitching right through it. I don't need to do both sides of that. It's very skinny, and that would make it really, really squashed. When you're choosing your batting for this, you want to use a low loft batting. You don't want to have real high loft because it'll cause all kinds of funny looks. That's a cool. I'm going to go around that. But that is basically how you're going to finish it off. And then that'll make your quilting, as well as it'll secure all of your pieces on the top down. Easy peasy. This is not difficult to do. This is actually quite easy to do. Let's see here, so we've got a window here that's, if I wanted to, since this brown window is on top of the cream window, I don't have to do the cream one. It's not going anywhere now. That brown one is firmly attached to the top of it, so I can just leave that as it is. And I'm just going real close to the edge. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So you will do that. I like to match my thread colors to my fabric, so I'm using this kind of reddish brown right now. And I'll switch, so I'll do all these little fence posts in the reddish brown. And I will switch to a blue when I do the blue in the sky, and I'll switch to a cream. Could you use an invisible thread? Absolutely, you could use an invisible thread. You're not going to be ironing this, so you don't have to worry about, you know, the difference between nylon and polyester thread. You guys do know that the polyester will melt if you put it in a hot dryer, whereas the nylon will not. But you don't have to use matching thread if you don't want to. You can use a monofilament in the top, and it'll do just the same deal. But that's all there is to this. It takes me on average, I'm gonna guess, an hour to do the top stitching on these. That's about it. And you just trim off all those ends. You're not going to be looking at the back side, so it truly doesn't matter what the back looks like. I do have a dark brown thread that I'm using for the back, you know, so it won't be terrible. But this is to hang on a wall or something like that, so you know, you're not going to be looking at the back. So I'm never too particularly concerned with what the back looks like. But once you get some of this through the center, then your sandwich is really secured. You're not going to have to worry about it moving around. And then you get some dimension. This particular one is a farm scene, so I'll get a little dimension in my clouds, which is nice. And then it'll be ready to hang on the wall. Put some binding on it and be done with it. That is all there is to this. This is simple, simple, simple. This part is the easy part. All that cutting and fusing and all that business is a little harder than this part. Once I get all of this done, obviously this has been folded, I'll iron it really well and it'll be ready to hang. And that is how you make a Tony Whitney Raw Edge Art applique quilt. Easy peasy. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you next time.